Are they on the line? Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the work session scheduled for today. What is today's date? October 8th. Thank you. We ask for the courtesy of the board members, staff, and members of the public that you please silence your cell phones. Welcome to Orange County School Board's work session, which has been scheduled for today, which I already said, October 8th, 2024, for the purpose of discussing the science of reading and rezoning of sites 97 and 126 relief schools. The public will not have an opportunity to participate in this work session to provide public comment because this is not a regularly scheduled school board meeting. No action will be taken, and there will be no open public comment period in which the public normally addresses the school board on relevant topics that are related to the work of the board. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Board members are attending in person or on the phone. Chair Jacobs, are you with us? Not yet? All right, we're expecting her soon. Member Salamanca? We're expecting her soon as well. And Member Gould?
Here.
Awesome. Thank you, Member Gould. And in person, we have Member Salamanca, myself, Member Gallo. What did I say? Sorry. Member Front. You can see her. Myself, Member Castor-Dental, Member Byrd, and then, of course, our superintendent and our general counsel. As a reminder, board members will not be engaging in outside electronic or digital communication during the meeting, so we can focus on the matters immediately before us. To my fellow board members, district staff, and members of the public, when speaking, please make sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so our YouTube and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. Again, thank you so much for participating in or attending today's meeting. We're going to have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would, during the moment of silence, if you're so inclined, please keep the entire state of Florida in your prayers for this storm that is headed our way. Thank you. And now for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. John, did you have an announcement?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Pursuant to 286-011 subsection 8 of Florida statutes, an entity may meet in private with its attorney to discuss pending litigation to which the entity is presently a party before a court or administrative agency, provided certain conditions are met, including the requirement that a transcript of the executive session will be made a part of the public record upon conclusion of the litigation. In this case, I am requesting the school board's advice concerning pending litigation styled Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, Inc. and Hatler versus School Board of Orange County, Florida, case number 2023-CA-005295-0. The executive session will be held on Tuesday, October 15, 2024, immediately following the Rule Development Workshop. The executive session will be a closed meeting held in Conference Room E of the Ronald Blocker Educational Leadership Center and will take approximately 1 hour. A notice has been drafted for posting. Those in attendance will be Teresa Jacobs, Chair, Angie Gallo, Vice Chair, School Board members Maria Salamanca, Alicia Ferrant, Pam Gould, Vicki Elaine Felder, Karen Castor-Dental, Melissa Byrd, Maria Vasquez, myself, Dr. Bridget Williams, Dr. Mike Armbruster, Chris Wilson, our outside counsel, and the court reporter. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. Has Chair Jacobs or Member Salamanca, will you just give me a nod when okay, perfect. Just in case you have questions. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, and good morning. As you know, Orange County Public Schools has had a focus on early literacy. Much has been talked about over the past few years on the science of reading. We, as a team, have been learning as much as we can around the science of reading and have been sharing information with our schools, administrators, and teachers. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Sarah Giuliani a couple of years ago and was enthralled to find out she really is a reading expert. She earned her PhD in communication science and disorders with an emphasis in early childhood language and reading development in 2012. She worked at the Florida Center for Reading Research while earning her doctorate degree at FSU. This was unusual for me to find out because she has a master's in special education with an emphasis in grades 6 through 12 reading and a bachelor's in elementary education from the University of Florida. So she's a former classroom teacher and currently works with the University of Florida's Literacy Institute, and she teaches courses in the Dyslexia Certificate Program. Her passion is educating educators and pre-service teachers about reading and language development. She has 3 incredible children. She is a parent. She has children in our school system, and she is married to her husband, Tim. Sarah, thank you so much for agreeing to present this morning and share your expertise. After the presentation, board members will have the opportunity to ask questions and comments. I call her. We have worked with the University of Florida, and Sarah has been working with our team in the area of professional development and actually looking to formalize that a little bit more as it relates to our administrators and our beginning teachers.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome.
Is this turned on? Okay. Can you guys hear me?
You're going to have to get really close to it.
I'm really loud, so I will talk normal, but I'm used to standing in front of a group of teachers, so I'm not used to sitting when I talk, so I'm going to do my best to not be jittery for you, because I'm used to moving back and forth. What is that?
Do you want to stand at the podium?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good now. I'm situated.
Okay.
Came early. So again, thank you so much for having me. I have been living in Orange County since 2017. My husband runs the Orlando Economic Partnership. So I've been to several of your meetings, just kind of listening to what you guys are doing and reading, just because it's my passion. And then just classroom teaching in general is, I just think mentoring classroom teachers is probably my favorite thing to do. I like to listen to what their concerns are. I like to help them think about better ways to solve their issues in their classroom, not just in reading, but K through 6. I like to listen to my high school teachers. My son just graduated from Boone, so I like to listen to them as well and help them come up with ideas. But that's kind of out of my wheelhouse. Science and math, chemistry, it's not really my thing. So, but science is my thing because the science of reading is my thing. So I'm here today to kind of share with you about the science of reading. I've taught several classes since 2008 in the science of reading at the University of Florida. Although it wasn't called the science of reading at the time, it still is the science of reading because the science of reading is not new. And so any of you who are familiar with the reading panel, the National Reading Panel, I was still an undergrad at the University of Florida when that came out, so I still feel like it's new, but I guess I've aged a bit. But it was at the forefront of my pre and service teaching at the University of Florida and ProTeach. So it was kind of cool that we were seeing a shift in thinking from our professors in real time. We had some professors that were kind of still maybe fiddling with the idea of a whole language approach, but we definitely had teachers who are professors who are focused in phonological awareness, phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And I say that because that is the science of reading, right? So we don't want to ever just be narrowly focused on one topic of reading because that's not going to create a reader. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that. And I may pause and ask you questions because I hope that it will keep you engaged. Okay. And because I'm used to teaching teachers. So, okay. So what is the science of reading? So it's a comprehensive, evidence-based understanding of the reading process. How you learn to read. You aren't born with the ability to read, right? You are wired to speak or communicate, maybe not speak, but to communicate. But reading, that's not something you are wired to do. So that has to be taught, right, in a fundamental, systematic, evidence-based way, okay? So on the screen, you can see that there is preventing reading difficulties in young children, putting reading first on the other side, and the National Reading Panel. So in 1998, Catherine Snow and colleagues published Preventing Reading Difficulties in Young Children. So it's necessary to understand reading development, where children come from, what they know when they get to you, and where you're going to send them. That's what I did with my degrees. I got an elementary ed degree. I got a master's in special ed with an emphasis in K through 12. But then when I got my PhD, I realized, I know where they are when they get to me. I know what to do to move them on, but I'm not so certain when they get to me in third grade. Where did they come from, right? So this Preventing Reading Difficulties in Children tells you that, shows you that, right? So then the next guide on the other side was Putting Reading First, and that was a fundamental guide that was put together for practitioners and facilitators to learn how to teach reading in the classroom, and they used the research from the National Reading Panel. Okay, some of you might be familiar with the pillars of reading. You may still think of it as 5 pillars of reading. I hope that you will walk away and not think of it as 5 independent pillars of one another that creates reading comprehension, because they're not 5 independent pillars, but things that are all working together. So the science of reading draws on multiple disciplines, including psychology, linguistics, education, and cognitive science to understand the complex process of reading. So we know that we need neuroscientists or neuropsychologists to work with kids to determine, do you have dyslexia? Does your child have dyslexia? What's going on in the language processing processors in your brain that will support you to learn how to read or may hinder you in your ability to learn how to read? So there's different lobes of your brain, and I won't go deep into that, but if you want to learn about it, you want to learn about how your brain works when you learn how to read. Then there's research in eye tracking. So what are your eyes doing as you read a word? What are your eyes doing as you are reading a sentence? Your eyes are tracking in a certain way, right? And you're using these cognitive processes in your brain with your eye tracking to make sense of these words that you're seeing on the screen, okay? Or you're seeing on your book screen, sorry. Hopefully most of us are still opening books, but encoding and decoding, those are words that I'll use today, okay? So then you have neural pathways of word recognition, and these neural pathways are going to be written words. How do you recognize written words? And then what parts of your brain you're using, right? And then they can use MRIs. So that's why I'm telling you, it's not just reading as in a sense of, I'm a teacher, I know how to teach reading, but we're using the science of how your brain is working and how these neural pathways are working so that children progress from the learning to read to reading to learn, right? So we want kids to make a shift that they are learning to read in K through 3, or you're learning to read even earlier than that because of phonological awareness skills at when you're learning, and then you read to learn in 3rd grade. So what are they understanding about the text that they are reading? So the science of reading helps educators make informed decisions about what to teach, which is the content, and then how to teach it, the delivery. The content, you might be thinking, oh, the standards. Sure, it's the standards of the content of what they have to learn by the time they enter such and such grade, or what they need to know by the time they leave such and such grade. But the delivery is where I think you guys have been having multiple conversations about. How do we deliver instruction? What does that look like? And what can we do that can be most effective for all of our students? So I'm going to ask you, does anyone know the difference between systematic instruction and explicit instruction in reading? Does anyone have an idea what the difference is? Okay. Oh, great. I'd love to hear you.
Well, I don't know that I'm right, but explicit instruction is really the phonics of phonemic awareness, like going over it over and over again so that they kind of master that technique versus like the 3 and or the other that we know now doesn't work. So it's more explicit in how we teach with the phonics and understanding the rules behind kind of the instruction of reading, like why things happen the way they do, why they sound the way they do to help kids understand.
Yeah, so I love the way that you're thinking, because you're definitely thinking in the right vein. That's perfect. It's a great way to start off our conversation. So we're building on previous knowledge, like you said. So with systematic instruction, we're going to connect what they know, what they don't know, and what we're going to do it. And so you're talking about modeling. So I do, we do, you do. So that's systematic instruction of how we follow, how is the child going to learn? So we're going to explicitly teach it to them. We're going to show them how to do it. We're going to do it together, and they're going to do it on their own, like you were saying. Sequencing from something that was more easy to something that is more difficult. That's what we think about when we think about systematic and explicit instruction. So we carefully sequence systematically what they would learn, but how we do it, that may be different from teacher to teacher. Explicit skill identification clearly identifies the specific skills and strategies that we are expecting our students to learn. Modeling and feedback, like you said, explicit instruction will have clear modeling, will have targeted skills, opportunities to practice, multiple opportunities to practice. Does that mean that every child needs every single skill? Not necessarily. Not every child's going to need to practice that same skill. You mentioned phonics or decoding. Not every child's not going to need the same phonics skill. Not every child's not going to need that same decoding skill. Some children are going to need something different. So we have to be thinking about how do we assess to determine something that is clear and systematic for every single child, right? So we're going to break down our complex skills, like you said. So that's systematic and explicit instruction. So why is it important? So we want to make sure that kids are accurate word readers, right? So for students to read and comprehend text, they must be able to read most of the words accurately, okay? We need to know that reading is a skill. So Emily Hanford suggests that there is no debate at this point that among scientists that reading is a skill that has to be explicitly taught, and we have to show the children the sounds, the letters, and how they correspond, okay? Phonics and decoding, like you said, is an important part of explicit and systematic instruction. Explicit instruction in phonics and decoding is essential for students to develop accurate, fluent word reading skills. And I say fluency because fluency is something that has to be taught as well, but not just at the word level, but also at the letter and the sound, and then full, complete sentences that helps to improve comprehension. We want to talk about a structured literacy approach, and I will get further into that a little bit later. Structured literacy emphasizes systematic teaching of phonics, phonemic awareness, and other foundational reading skills. Other foundational reading skills, it's not just phonics and phonemic awareness, comprehension, vocabulary instruction. How are we teaching those to these kids? We need to know that it's important to be identifying children early. We can't get to a point where they're in 3rd grade and we know you've been struggling for a while and now we need to help you. Or you're in 8th grade and you've been struggling for a while. But where they are struggling may not be the same for every single child, okay? We need to make sure that we're giving ongoing professional development. And what I have found by working with your staff, communicating with your staff, they are working on ongoing professional development diligently. And some of the conversations I've had, I'm just so impressed by the staff that you have working on your reading and language. I will also say I am also very impressed by the superintendent, her knowledge of the science and reading, and the conversations we have. They go a little bit deeper every single time, and every time I think, you must have taught early childhood at some point because you know quite a bit about early childhood. Okay, so explicit instruction in reading. So by using explicit instruction and focusing on specific reading skills, teachers can provide effective support to students and help them develop the necessary skills for successful reading. So explicit instruction targets reading skills such as phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We are not just focused on just one area of instruction. If we do, we're leaving a lot of kids out of the conversation and of the equation. Ensure clarity, mastery, and confidence. We want to think about we're modeling explicit instruction to ensure every child, every learner in that classroom feels seen and they're learning how to read. Because learning how to read is fundamental, but we know you have to learn how to read so that you can read maybe a bus map. Maybe you want to apply for a job. You need to know how to read. So we want to make sure that we are confident and clear, but we are also helping them build confidence in themselves, not just for third grade, but for the rest of their lives, right? Let's see, focus on a specific skill. So depending on the specific skill that the child needs to be taught, and there needs to be an assessment to determine this is the skill the child needs to be taught. Whether it is a phonics skill, whether it is fluency or vocabulary skills, we need to be specific and we need to target our instruction because those skills need to be directly taught, they need to be targeted, and that's going to help the child to develop that skill. Now, I give a certain assessment. I won't say what the assessment is, but I oftentimes give friends assessments to their children because they're saying, my child's struggling, I don't know what to do. They tell me it's this, they tell me it's that. Okay, well, let me just sit down and find out. Not every child is struggling with CVC words. Not every child is struggling with digraphs. Not every child is struggling with trigraphs. I have certain children that I sit down and I assess, and their phonics skills or their phonemic awareness skills, that's not their struggle. They have a struggle in vocabulary, comprehension. I have some students that I assess, I give the assessment and I say, yeah, we got some phonics skills we got some big gaps in phonics skills. Maybe it's CVC words. Maybe it's just the SH sound. Maybe it's all the long vowel sounds. Maybe it's the short vowel sounds. And if I come back, I'd love to assess you on your sound knowledge because you'll have to think about the sounds that are being made in your head and producing them for a child to understand, right? So I tell parents, make sure you listen to these sounds and you're producing them correctly because you could be giving them feedback that is not explicit, right, or not supporting them. So we need to really be thinking about what kind of assessments we are using to drive our instruction, okay? And are these assessments really targeting the instruction that this particular child needs? Because I have 3 children, not one of them are the same, and not one of them needed help in specific areas that related to what their brother did or what their sister did. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some theories. Okay, has anyone heard about the simple view of reading? I'm sure you guys have heard about it. No, you haven't. Okay, so if you've done the simple view of reading, if you've done any type of deep dive or even a slow dive or a short dive into the science of reading, you'll have heard of the simple view of reading because that's one of the research components that we use to drive us, professors or researchers, drive our understanding of curriculum that's being chosen, curriculum that's being taught, what children need to understand. So this is one theory. I won't go into all of them. We don't have enough time. I will only go into a few. So the simple view of reading is a conceptual framework that explains the underlying factors contributing to reading difficulties. Okay? It suggests that reading challenges can be contributed to one of 3 main major weaknesses in word recognition weaknesses in language comprehension or a combination of both. So I have some slides that will articulate that and illustrate that for you. So the simple view of reading. So we think of it as this. If we think of it as a math problem, it's decoding, so the ability to apply sound symbol relationships to words, word recognition, and multiply that by language comprehension, which is the ability to understand spoken language, which is listening comprehension, that equals reading comprehension, okay? It's not just one, it's not focusing on one or focusing on the other, you've got to focus on everything. So I made this little slide to have you understand in a Venn diagram, what does poor language comprehension look like, what does poor decoding look like, and what happens if you're struggling in both. So poor language comprehension, adequate decoding skills, and weak language comprehension skills. So a hyperlexic student, a student with severe language comprehension issues, and excellent decoding skills. Have you ever met a child like that? They are very, 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 very hard to support because they can sound out a word like it's no one's business, but they cannot recall what they sounded out. So when you're working with them, you really need to be focusing on comprehension, vocabulary development, because they can decode the words, okay? On the other side, we have children that are poor at decoding, They have adequate language comprehension skills, but they have weak decoding skills. So a dyslexic student, a student with language comprehension abilities that are least average and they have severe decoding difficulties. If you are struggling in both, you have a weakness in both areas, sometimes referred as the garden variety poor reader. You've heard a teacher say, I don't know, they're struggling to read, I have a poor reader. Well, we would look at that child and think, are you working on comprehension instruction, but not comprehension, but the comprehension of language, understanding vocabulary, morphology, Greek and Latin roots, you're deeply understanding those things, depending on the child's grade level, right? Poor at decoding, what sounds are we working on? Have you done an assessment to determine these are the sounds that this child needs? And MTSS, in your different tiers, what are you doing in those tiers to support this poor at decoding? So you can look at it this way too, okay? So if you like puzzles. So if you see it's blue, but the blue, which kind of looks purple to me, so that first box should be blue. So if that blue box is full, all 4 squares are full, and you multiply that, which is decoding, and you multiply that 4 reds, right? You get a purple box, because blue times red makes purple. So you've got a full student there. Now you have decoding that's full. You have that child who can completely decode the words. They can decode any word. And you multiply that by the red language comprehension, where there's a struggle. Then you don't get a full block, right? You have a purple block that's not full. So that child is struggling, in this instance, in language comprehension. Then the next one, you have a student with a half blue box. So they're obviously struggling in decoding, but their language comprehension is strong. They have a good understanding. Maybe they have a family member that travels, and they go with their family member and they travel a lot and they see the world, right? They've gone different places and they understand different words, and they understand how those words, they understand those words in context, and they can explain it. For instance, I'm going to go back to a study. There's a study about baseball, and they had kids who couldn't decode the story about baseball at all. But then they had children who really, really understood baseball. And then in the end, when they took the assessment, the kids that really could understand baseball, they did well, even if they were struggling in decoding or not. Because why? They understood the context of baseball, right? So teaching children in context and building their language comprehension, and I don't mean reading a book and explaining, I don't mean language comprehension in that sense, but the experience of the outside world, field trips, right? Whatever the teacher is bringing in, so they can feel it, they can see it. I taught first grade. I taught actually in a county that was at the beach, and I had children who had never been to the beach before. All you had to do is drive over the bridge, like 5 minutes. I didn't understand that. I grew up at the beach. I grew up on the other side of the bridge on the island. And these children, I did a whole project on the ocean and the beach. And I think I had 11 of them. I had 17 children, 11 had never been to the beach before. So this wasn't a time when you could take kids to the beach, and I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. Probably because I was a really young teacher, and I talked to my dad and my husband, who was not even my husband yet, so bless him, to go as chaperones, because I couldn't even get chaperones. And my father had a cookout, cooked hot dogs and hamburgers for these kids at the beach, and my husband helped these kids in the water. He was my boyfriend, so again, thank you for that. And we had an experience of the beach. And when these kids came back, their understanding of everything that I had worked so hard to teach them for 6 weeks, it was cemented in their brain. They smelled the ocean, they felt the sand, they knew what a cookout was at the beach. They had experiences that they didn't have before, right? So that's language comprehension. Okay, so now we're gonna move into Scarborough's rope. I hope maybe some of you are somewhat familiar. If you're not, we're gonna go a little deeper into this one as well. There's only one other theory after this, so we won't go too deeper than that. But so we have a Scarborough's rope, and how children weave intricate reading skills together into one to learn how to read. So this is Scarborough's rope, okay? So I probably skipped a slide because, oh no, your slides are probably in order. I moved mine around, but we're good. Okay, so think about, again, decoding and language comprehension like we did before. Okay, now let's go a little deeper and think about it this way. We have language comprehension for children. We're building in our classrooms our teachers are working so hard to build background knowledge, like I did at the beach, right? Was building their background knowledge. Probably should have done it in the beginning, probably would have had a better outcome through the whole 6 weeks, but I didn't. I built the background knowledge when I could, okay? Vocabulary knowledge. Think of all the words that you may use to build vocabulary with your own children or your grandchildren or your friends' kids to build vocabulary, right? If we think about vocabulary, vocabulary can be tiered. Becca McGowan talks about tiered vocabulary instruction. Tier 1, everything we use. Maybe table, pencil, chair. Those are tier 1 words. Tier 2 words, does anyone know what a tier 2 word is? Okay, so tier 2 words are words that we use that yield high utility, right? Words that we see in picture books, maybe we read, a word that you can show emotion, right? So the word emotion is a word that would be a tier 2 word. We have to explain to a child what that means. And then we have tier 3 words. And those words are words that are very specific to content area. So words that you would read in chemistry books like beaker maybe, or words in social studies that are specific to just social studies. So those are tiered words. So when teachers are teaching in the classroom, they're thinking of specific tiered words that they should teach their children. Tier 2 yields a lot of utility. Lots of times they're SAT words. Guys might be familiar with those. So the structures of language, how does language work? We want to think about verbal reasoning. Can we reason the words that we're learning and what do they mean? And then overall literacy knowledge. How does a book work? What is the spine? What is the table of contents? What's the index, right? Show me a sentence. Show me a word. Show me a letter. So we're asking kids to understand those things about literacy. And then we had word recognition, which is another layer that is incredibly important. That's incredibly important, but it's no more important than language comprehension, okay? So word recognition is your phonological awareness skills, phonemic awareness skills, decoding and encoding, right? So decoding is seeing the words, sounding them out, knowing them, seeing the words, reading them. Encoding is being able to spell them, say them, right? To write them down. And then sight recognition. So those are our learning words by sight. So when you learn a word, it goes into your bank, you've seen it 3, 5, 6 times, 10 times, you know that word. Your eye tracks it and just knows it, okay? So as you become increasingly automatic and increasingly strategic in your language comprehension, you weave this beautiful rope in your brain that is skilled reading. And a skilled reader is fluent in their execution of the coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. So the next slide goes deeper in that for you, and that's just for you to take a look at later if you're like, I want to talk about this, or I want to think about this some more. But it explains to you the different strands. What does effortless word recognition mean? What happens when there's a disruption? And we know when something what happens if there's a disruption, they're struggling to read. And then what's the implications for instruction? So the most important part I want to highlight is the implication for instruction. So Scarborough's rope emphasizes the need for a balanced and comprehensive approach. So we want it to be balanced and comprehensive. We don't want to focus on just one thing. For reading instruction, addressing both word recognition and language comprehension skills to foster skilled and fluent reading. So understanding these theories will help us, you guys, teachers, determine how to support, scaffold, and guide students to the next phase of where they are in reading. So now we're going to talk about research-based and evidence-based. And I think these words are used interchangeably, but they are different. And so we want to make sure that we understand the difference between those when we are helping the staff make decisions on what we think should be used in classrooms. So evidence-based approaches offer higher level of confidence because they're tested and proven. So they're a higher level of confidence than research-based because research-based approaches may be useful, but we need to dive into them a little bit more and research them a little bit more just to prove their efficacy in practice. Research-based approaches emphasize scientific research, so they look at the scientific research and they use empirical evidence to develop reading instruction methods. So it hasn't been tested. It's been research-based. It's created on research, but the program itself or the approach itself has not been tested and retested and tested again to prove it has a statistical, it can make a statistical change in children's lives. So evidence-based approach focuses on analyzing and applying real-world data and outcomes to inform our reading instruction. So if it's evidence-based, it's been tested and tested again, and we can use that when we teach children how to read. There are similarities and differences, so we want to explore the commonalities and distinctions between these two approaches to reading instruction. So we want to think about that. So what is research-based? Well, it's scientific research. It's grounded in scientific studies that systematically examine the effectiveness of various teaching methods, strategies, approaches. Demonstrates effectiveness. Research-based approaches have been shown through rigorous studies to lead improved student learning and achievement. They replicable results, so research-based instruction have been replicated across multiple studies. It's peer-reviewed and validated, and continuous improvement needs to be made on it. Whereas evidence-based instruction improves students' instructional methods have been shown to significantly improve students' performance on assessments and overall reading achievement. Evidence-based instruction has targeted skill development, so they focus on building specific skills and competencies that we know the students need help in to lead more comprehensive and lasting learning. And it helps us adapt to the diverse needs of our students because we have a pretty diverse group of students in OCPS. Evidence-based instruction provides a reliable and effective approach to improving student outcomes, developing targeted skills, and addressing our student learning needs. So evidence-based is empirical evidence. It's founded on rigorous scientific studies that objectively measure the impact and the effectiveness of teaching methods and strategies. That's what scientific studies do. They are founded on rigorous scientific research studies, and they are measured objectively. There's not something they're trying to prove something, but it's not because they just want this to work. They want to make sure that it works. The effectiveness of teaching approach must be validated through multiple well-designed studies, like what comes out of the Florida Center for Reading Research. There are multiple well-designed studies. It's conducted by independent researchers. We want to make sure that those independent researchers want to make sure that there's consistency, reliability, and there is a statistical outcome that works, that proves that this works. We want to demonstrate effectiveness, so evidence-based instruction does that. The research must clearly show that the teaching method or strategy leads to improved student learning, performance, or other meaningful educational outcomes compared to alternative approaches. So you brought up the 3 cueing system, so now we know, was the 3 cueing system helping children learn how to read? No. Was there research to support that? Nope. But now with the science of reading, we can say, see why, right? So you brought that up. That was not an effective evidence-based strategy to teach children to read. To tell them to look at the picture while they read. We had them reading books, and we told them, well, if you don't know the word, look at the picture. Well, think of those books that you just look at the picture at. There's one picture, and it's maybe like a cat with a guitar. And the kid's like, I don't know. A banjo, well, you know they did not sound out the word, or they say guitar and you know it's banjo. So they can't really decode the picture and have them understand what they're reading. So that's when we want to make sure that we're using evidence-based instruction. So implementing evidence-based practices, we want to look at students' needs, the available resources, and then the implementation fidelity. So you want to assess and progress monitor, which I know you guys are doing, but we want to make sure that we're doing that. And as we do that, we want to be able to pick out the specific skills and abilities or what they cannot do, right, to determine which evidence-based practice is going to be most effective next. Do we need to remediate or can we move forward? What are our available resources? We want to think about our materials, our technology. What professional development do we need give them this time. So if we know something's not working, what kind of professional development do we need to give our teachers? It may not be what we had planned, right? It may not be what we had planned for January, but now we see our outcomes and we decide, well, maybe we need to do something a little different in January, right? We want to ensure that the evidence-based practices are implemented as intended. So sometimes what we can find is that there's a program or a strategy or approach that's being used in a classroom, and they say they're using it to fidelity, but we don't know that for fact, that teachers are maybe using it to fidelity. So we want to make sure that if teachers are trained in using something, they're accurately doing what they say they're doing, and there is a method to watch the teacher do that, and you can prove that the teacher is doing that in the classroom. Because I've spent a lot of time watching teachers teach. In fact, I did that at the Florida Center for Reading Research. I coded hours upon hours of videos of teachers teaching. And sometimes teachers said that they were teaching phonics and they were teaching phonological awareness. It wasn't phonics. Or they said they were doing something, but they were doing something slightly different. So we want to make sure that our teachers know what they're teaching and why they're teaching it, and we're watching them and we're supporting them, and there's a method to support them if they are not doing what they think they're doing. Because I am guilty of probably the same thing my first few years of teaching, thinking I was doing one thing and I probably wasn't. And have you been in a classroom? They are fast-paced, man. A kid needs a pencil. One kid's got to go to the bathroom. You get a slightly off track by 1 second because there's a lot of stuff going on in a classroom that's fast-paced. And so we want to make sure that we can watch our teachers and give them feedback. Okay, so this is another way to view reading that will hopefully shift your mind away from the pillars of reading and maybe think about a bigger picture of reading, like Scarborough's rope. So this is the active view of reading, okay? So self-regulation skills, and I was talking to the team back here about my first year of teaching, and man, I probably needed some help with some self-regulation skills my first year of teaching, I'm not gonna lie, and my kids needed help with active regulation skills. So while you're reading, while you're doing anything, you have to think about your motivation and your engagement. For now, what is my motivation and engagement right now teaching you about the science of reading, right? So I have to think about that. And what is your motivation and engagement to listen to me, right? That's always a certain piece we have to think about when we're teaching children to read, and then the viewpoint of the child that's reading, okay? So executive functioning skills, we need to think about their executive functioning skills. What are they capable of doing? What are they capable of doing at this moment in time or at this point of their stage of development? Word recognition strategies, comprehension strategies, vocabulary strategies, those all fit into active regulation skills. And then if you look at the top, we have word recognition. So word recognition is phonological awareness, syllables, breaking words into syllables, phonemes, etc. The alphabetic principle. Do we all know what the alphabetic principle is? There's these things, they're called letters, and these letters make words. It's pretty easy, right? We want to make sure that they know that. Some kids don't. Some kids are in 3rd grade and they just are struggling and they don't see that, right? So we want to know that. We want to make sure that they understand phonics knowledge, right? They understand that these letters make these sounds. That this letter says this sound, so the letter A says, ah, and the letter A says A, right? We want to make sure they know that and they're fluent with that. We want to make sure that they understand decoding skills, that they can count the sounds in words, and we can use Elkonin boxes to break up these sounds in words, and they can write these letters in these boxes, and then they can do some spelling work. Maybe we want to talk about decoding skills at later decoding skills, so multisyllabic words need to be taught, or maybe they don't need to be taught. Maybe some of these children they know it. They're strong in decoding. But we want to think about that. And then we want to recognize our sight words, the words that children know by sight. And then language comprehension at the bottom. So see, here we are again. Word recognition, language comprehension. Scarborough's rope, here we're doing it again. So cultural and other context knowledge. So we need to think about engaging material, that is engaging for children across the board. And it's not necessarily engaging. What is engaging for me is not what is engaging to you, right? What I read at night is not what my husband reads at night. We read two very different genres of books. So we have to think about what are they interested in, and what is their cultural background, and think about their culture as we put in reference the types of things that they're reading. We want to think about reading specific background knowledge. So text features. There's a different text feature with a narrative text and expository text. You know, you've read the newspaper. It looks very different than whatever book you probably enjoy at night, right? Very different. We want to teach them text features. They have to know that what is a table of contents? What's a heading? What's a subheading? What is that picture? Why is there writing under that picture? Oh, the writing under the picture tells me something? Kids don't know that. I taught third grade, and I had kids that did not know. We read the story about ants. They could find the answer to the question that was written by the company in the teeny tiny little picture, right? So you have to read that subtext in a picture. We have to teach them that. They don't inherently know to do that. Language structure, so syntax, semantics, the meaning of words, what do they mean? Why are words in the certain order that they're in? They need to know that. And then word recognition, language comprehension, and active self-regulation, which is happening during this entire time, create bridges processes for print concepts, for reading fluency, for vocabulary knowledge, morphological awareness, grapho-semantic cognitive flexibility, right? That all comes together to create a reader, right? So those are all the things that you are doing when you read. And it's the same things that kids are doing when they read. The process doesn't change necessarily. So we talk about structured literacy. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with the term structured literacy as an intervention framework for Tier 3 intervention or instruction. Structured literacy is a term that was developed approximately 10 years ago in an effort to describe certain principles of instruction that have been found to be effective in building accuracy and fluency skills. Structured literacy intervention is best suited for students in Tier 3 because of the explicit, systematic, and cumulative diagnostic approach to learning. But some elements of structured literacy can benefit across the tiers, right? So I use a Mac, so, okay. So we want to think about the different areas of structured literacy that need to be taught to children. So we have phonology, which is the rule system within a language that describes how speech sounds work. We want to talk about semantics, syntax, morphology, syllables, how many syllables are in words. We don't necessarily need to teach every single child about every single syllable type when they're decoding a word for them to code a word. Some kids can do that themselves. Some kids can break these words up themselves, but we want to understand this as a framework for our understanding. We want children to understand the sound syllables, and then we want to make sure we're using evidence-based teaching principles, systematic and cumulative, explicit instruction, and we're using diagnostics or progress monitoring to drive effective reading instruction. So all of that is effective reading instruction. So I want to just quickly talk to you about the difference in the different types of reading that you think about that maybe you thought about were pillars, but now maybe you have a different frame of reference. So a well-rounded literacy program ensures that students not only learn to decode words, but they also develop comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. All of that has to be going on. We cannot just focus on one area. Just because it's early childhood, it's kindergarten, first or second grade, we can't just focus on decoding. It can't be that. We have to build their vocabulary. You can't catch them up in third grade and build vocabulary. You have to be doing it. Fluency, word reading, reading at sentence level. We need reading at an entire passage. We want to make sure that we're focusing on those things. So phonemic awareness is the foundation for learning to read and to spell. Without it, students will struggle to decode and recognize the relationship between sounds and letters, because we know there's a relationship between sounds and letters. Phonics is the instruction that helps kids decode written words, the words they see, and the written language by connecting sounds to letters and letters to patterns. So I see this pattern over and over and over again. I know I can decode this down to a word. This is essential for early reading skills, okay? Vocabulary, strong vocabulary is directly linked to reading comprehension. You may be able to code every word on that page, but if you don't know what those words mean, you will not be able to comprehend that text. And thinking about the frame of reference of the things that you know about when you come to the book to read. What is your background knowledge when you come to this book? Have you set an intention to read this story, and does it connect with the text? Fluency. Fluent readers can focus more on understanding the meaning of the text rather than having to just decode the words. They can move their shifting mind to think about, okay, what am I reading about? Fluency bridges the gap between word recognition and comprehension. Okay. Comprehension is the ultimate goal of reading, right? Nobody just picks up a book to decode it and walk away. You've spent all that time reading it. Students need to engage with text on a deeper level. Okay. We need them to think critically about what they're reading. We need them to draw inferences on what they're reading. What does this mean for the next book that I'm going to read? Can they make an inference on the next book they're going to read that's maybe in the series? Maybe your child loves Percy Jackson, right? And they want to learn about Percy Jackson. And now they're super interested in Greek gods and goddesses. Like my middle son just loves Percy Jackson. I mean, he's 15 almost, and he'd read Percy Jackson again tomorrow. I would hate to not say City Spies, because my kid loves City Spies, and we love the author of that book too, right? So my child wanted to learn more about cities. So frame of reference, understanding, can I take them to one of the cities that this author is talking about? Can I show them about the city? Okay, I may not financially be able to take the children, I was financially able to take all the children to the beach. It was like renting a bus and going to the beach, but can't take every child to Athens to learn about Greek gods, but I certainly can bring something from a computer in and show them about the history of Athens and explain to them about Greek gods. It gives them a frame of reference. They connect with the text, and maybe they'll comprehend the text a little better now because I've done a really great job of building that background knowledge. We want to make sure we teach them to engage with text on deeper levels. There's 3 different ways we might engage with text. Text to text, you might have a connection from this text to another text you read. Text to self, you may have had an experience that you connect with this text because you've experienced that yourself. Some of these experiences kids have are not positive necessarily, so there may be a text that they read that they connect with this text on a very deep and personal level. We may not understand it, but they understand it, and they've connected to it somehow. And then you have text to world. So I Survived books. Have you read any of the I Survived, right? So I Survived, I think there's like my oldest one liked these. My oldest son loves the Titanic. So it was I Survived the Titanic. And he connected to that. And that was something that was going on in the world because maybe it was so many years since the Titanic, something happened in the Titanic, and he had some text to world connection. He had seen it in the news. He had seen it in the newspaper. It was a text to world connection he had. So 3 ways that we can make a connection with text: text to self, text to text, text to world. Okay. So children are doing these things. So the term structured literacy, like I was talking about, isn't designed to replace Orton Gillingham. It's not designed to replace multisensory or any other term that we use commonly in our science of reading or language instruction. It's an umbrella term that's designed to describe all of the programs that teach reading in essentially the same way. Okay? So I want you to think about that when we think about structured literacy and the words that I just told you about reading, those pillars. Okay. So I just want to caution us, because I think there's been a lot of conversation, not just here, but across the state, because kids are struggling to read, man, and we want to teach them. Who doesn't want to teach them? Everybody wants their child to learn how to read. We want to make sure that we know that one size does not fit all. A heavy focus on phonics isn't going to suit all learners, particularly those who benefit from more structured literacy approach that includes comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency development. Do I sound like that? Just kidding. Okay, we don't want to put an overemphasis on phonics. My middle son could decode words better than my older son when he was 3. My middle son could decode a word like it is nobody's business. He still can, because it was skill he just had. Had he had an overemphasis on phonics instruction, I dare tell you, he probably wouldn't have behavior. He would have been a behavior in the classroom because he knew how to decode those words. So my explanation was, he doesn't need that. He needs something different or more. He needs reading about books and making connections and thinking of strategies of how to read, because he didn't need more phonics instruction. He'd had that. He even understood multisyllabic instruction. He was reading chapter books when he was 3. And he understood it. He's an interesting one. So, but I'm saying my kids are different. My older one needed phonics instruction. He needed systematic, explicit phonics instruction, and I knew it. And so I would supplement whatever he wasn't getting. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about those kids that are strong decoders and they are strong comprehenders. What are we giving them, right? We also want to think about those kids who are struggling with comprehension, but they can decode, right? We would benefit from a more structured literacy approach. Park would have benefited from a very structured literacy approach that would focus on his comprehension, his vocabulary, and his fluency development, okay? We don't ever want to have an overemphasis on phonics. I don't ever want to overemphasize that, although I think that is incredibly important. And I work with a lot of kids who are struggling. A heavy focus on phonics can neglect the other critical components of reading, right? So vocabulary, comprehension strategies, we want to expose them to rich, authentic text. We could hinder students from developing a well-rounded reading skills if we're continually giving the same. A lack of flexibility. So using a very rigid, structured approach could affect a teacher's ability to tailor the instruction based on their progress monitoring or what they see that individual child needs more of or less of. Our classrooms are diverse. If we focus too much on one area, like when we were focusing so much on children comprehending, we were just focusing on that, like, well, guess the word around it. What do you think the story was about? Well, what words did you hear? When we were overemphasizing that, we were missing decoding. They weren't decoding. So that's another way that this could go. We don't want to go too far one way or too far the other. We want to make sure that we're meeting our students where they are. So we don't want to just focus on basic decoding and phonological skills at the expense of higher order literacy skills. We have higher level literacy skills that we need them to accomplish, right? So we don't want to overemphasize any one thing. When my older son was in 2nd grade, they focused on fluency instruction. We weren't in this county, but they focused very heavily on fluency instruction, that every single week he had a fluency probe, and every single week it was sent home that this was his fluency probe compared to the rest of the kids in his class, okay? So it was an overemphasis on fluency, but at what point were kids not getting decoding skills? Or at what point were you not asking them any questions on comprehension? So we want to make sure we're looking at a big approach. So I want you to just think about what good readers do. Okay, when they read, good readers decode, yes. But good readers ask themselves questions. What does that make me think of? Have I read something about this before? Why did that character do that? They monitor. Did I understand that sentence? Do I need to go back? They make inferences. They read between the lines. They see what the author is trying to suggest without the author necessarily suggesting it. You read between the lines every day. They visualize it. They can make a mental picture in their head. Some kids can't do this on their own, right? They summarize what they've read. They look at it, they make a little summary in their head, and they keep moving. Those are what good readers do. They have to be taught and supported on how to do this. So this is OCPS's resources for comprehensive instruction. These are the resources that I found that you guys use. So I just wanted to leave it here with that. I cannot speak to everything that is on this list, but I know there is a staff of people behind me, and maybe some people up here, who are very familiar with what you guys are using and why you've chosen to use it. And if you have questions for them, they are really, really smart, so they can help you with that. But that is it for me on the science of reading.
That was great. Thank you.
I have so much more to say, but I didn't want to take all day because we have preps for things, right?
Thank you so much. We just are so excited that we have such expertise in our community because you're right. If children don't know how to read, school is a terrible experience. And so, board members, we are now ready to answer any questions you might have or hear any comments.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. We have several members of the board that wish to speak. Member Front.
Thank you. First of all, that was really phenomenal. And for those of us up here who are not teachers, you did an excellent job of explaining this well, especially with, I feel like a lot of people, when they get their PhD, they start using really big words, and all of a sudden it's like you lose your listener, but you have I can see why you do what you do.
Thank you.
You've got a great way of explaining it, breaking everything down, and in different ways. I love it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, but.
Yes, I know. I feel like we need to do tons more of these work sessions because I think, honestly, this is, if we can get our kids reading, we're going to see better behavior. We're going to see better just overall in our schools. And reading is the core of to me, like a core of the issue. So one of my questions in this last slide, when we're looking at the resources that we're using, do you feel that these are good resources, or do you have other resources that that you would suggest? I know maybe that puts you on the spot, but I think, I've seen other resources that we've used in our district that have worked phenomenally. And so I'm just curious if you feel that like SIPS is great, or is Haggerty great?
So I feel like the resources that I see here are evidence-based. And when I see evidence-based, I feel like we're on the right track. And I think it's a good place to be. I do think that there's always areas of improvement because curriculum improves as it sits on its shelf, or it continually goes through a revamp. So are there different things? I mean, I think that there are other things that can be used, but I think here is a good list of things that are being used that are known to improve reading instruction. You had said something about behavior. You think when reading goes up, behavior goes up. I think that is, we have to be careful about correlations and causations and understanding if kids are reading, are the behaviors better or not. I hope to think that is the case because they're not bored or they understand what's going on, but sometimes behaviors are just not great and it's not tied to necessarily reading. So we want to be mindful of that too, because sometimes teachers tell you, I'm trying everything I can, I'm doing everything right, and I just can't can't break through with this kid. So, I mean, it's not necessarily going to improve all behaviors, but I like to think the same way. Kids will at least feel better about themselves going in, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's really what I was getting at with the behaviors is I think we have a lot of kids that are struggling and they're bored. They're monkeying around in class and we have that kind of behavior. But when they start to understand what they're reading and they're engaged and now school is fun, it's a different behavior.
And we want to be sure too, though, like when we want to make sure that we think about there are kids that are getting instruction that they don't need, like the one I was telling my own child, getting instruction that maybe he doesn't need. He needed something that was, more comprehension, vocabulary instruction. My concern was his behavior might be an issue because he was getting maybe too much of something he didn't need. So it goes both ways because we have diverse learners, so we got to make sure we think about them all. So
absolutely, I have the same exact situation. Actually, the teacher sat me down and felt maybe he had ADD or something of that sort, and I said, I honestly think he's just bored in your class. I think he's maybe, and so the minute they were giving him just some extra twisted, shifted things a little bit, all of a sudden it all kind of cleared up. And so I think that's true. I think for us as well, it shows that our teachers really are doing more than just sitting and saying, just working on one little thing. It's such a vast,
especially with this slide. I think that's what you're hitting on.
Yes, absolutely.
This
like
one.
any of these slides. I just think there's just so much there's just so many areas. Everything has like 20 different things that they're
Yes.
doing within them. So not just reading a text, but like you said, taking them to the beach or on a field trip, or you're learning about the zoo and now you go to the zoo and you get to see the animals. And
Yep.
so all those things is very helpful for us. If you have other resources that you feel are evidence-based, that you have seen just amazing results in, that you don't see on the list, I would love to see them, because I think that's something that, we're always looking for whatever we can to make sure that we really get our kids on the right track.
Okay,
I
I'll share
appreciate
them.
it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have some in mind, but I will share them probably not right now. I'll wait and hear everyone's questions.
Thank you, Member Front. Member Byrd.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation. I seriously could sit and listen to you talk all day long.
My husband feels the same way. My children too.
I too am extremely passionate about reading. I started my career as a reading educator. So this is a huge passion of mine. I think that I'm so grateful that you came today to share all of this with the board, and that we have this video for our community even to watch and learn about what the science of reading is. Because there is a lot of misinformation, and and there's so many things that as parents we can do to help. And I loved that you mentioned the baseball study, because that was, I remember hearing that, and it was like a light bulb moment for me. And it's so obvious. I mean, we can open up a manual for like how to fix something in our house. And if you are not a handy person, you have to like read it 15 times to understand it. But if you are a handy person, you read it once and you get it, right? It's the same thing with kids. And so I think that that is a huge piece that sometimes we really miss. And I wanted to kind of get your thought on, this is what the knowledge gap speaks of, and you know about that, I'm sure, obviously. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. There's a real, in that book, they really emphasize the importance of the context and giving kids that background knowledge, and how so many of our kids are lacking that piece. And then when they sit down in the classroom and they're reading a passage that's something that is just like a foreign language to them because they've never experienced it. And then you've got kids, like you said, that are going on trips with their parents and traveling to different cities, and they understand what a subway is and what, all these different things. And they're coming into this classroom with two totally different experiences. And that is playing a huge part on how they're learning to read. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on that. That's kind of my first question. And if looking at those resources that we are using, if you think that there is a strong enough emphasis in those resources on that piece, and if there's any that you would recommend for that. And then the other question I have is, you touched a little bit on the executive functioning skills and developmentally appropriate things that kids can do. Like, are we asking them to do the right thing? And I know that that's a big concern, because we push, right? And I'd like to kind of hear your thoughts on that a little bit with like pre-K, kindergarten, if you feel like what you've seen or what you're seeing in schools, if we're addressing that, or if we're putting kids in a position to be successful, or if we're asking too much of 4 and 5-year-olds. Do you kind of understand what I'm getting at there? Thank you.
But your first question, remind me your first question. Okay, so certainly there's a knowledge gap with kids when they're coming in and they've had, I think, meaningful differences in the lives of children. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that research, but the number of words kids are hearing that are from high stressful situations, low SES, middle SES, and high SES, there's like a difference of 7,000 words or something that kids are coming to school knowing if they're high SES compared to lower SES. So there's already a gap when they're coming. Knowledge. I was a reading intervention teacher by my 4th year of teaching. I taught Enna County. Actually, our former superintendent of Orange County, Dr. Joyner, was the superintendent where I ended up teaching my first few years of teaching. And there was a big emphasis on data and meeting with our principal and explaining I had to meet with my principal, who was a principal here in Orange County at Zellwood. I would have to meet with him every 9 weeks and have my children on a certain, I'd have them listening to high need or high need to low need, however he wanted it. And I had to go through every single kid on the page and explain, this is where this child is, this is what I'm doing to remediate. This is where this child is, this is where I'm to remediate. So I guess I was pretty successful. I taught the FCAT that year, and I only had 2 kids get a level 2, and I had 27 kids that year. So the next year, he was kind enough. I had a child who let me be the academic resource reading teacher, and I'd have to go and support kids in classrooms. So I got to see a vast majority of kids in that school. And I had a kid who I taught a story to, and the whole time the child did not understand about this salad that this guy was making with a cucumber because he only knew about a sea cucumber. So this entire time, this child thought I was cutting up a sea cucumber and putting it in a salad and eating it. And this child was like, nobody eats that. He had no idea what a cucumber was, which to me, I even felt like, at the grocery store, but it was a sea cucumber, which is like prickly and we may be previewed, because at that point you did previewing of a book, and I have found since then that's not a strategy that shows a lot of support, previewing books with kids, unless, well, not previewing, previewing does, but predicting what you think is going to happen. It's previewing is good, but the predicting of a book and not setting an intention and explaining what you think is going to happen in the story, a child could be predicting the wrong thing the entire time they get to the end of the book, and they're like, I can't believe that happened. Well, why not? Because their frame of reference, they did not predict. They did not predict what you thought they were going to predict. And so they get to the end of the book, they've decoded it beautifully, you're talking about it, and they just have no clue what you're talking about. So I think we need to be better about understanding our strategies that we're using and comprehension when we're working even with the little ones, because that knowledge gap is wide. And so we have another story about a child that did not understand about Mount Vesuvius, and they got to the end of the book and did not realize that Mount Vesuvius exploded, did not understand that that was a volcano. And so the entire time the child was just confused. So we need to make sure that we're setting, if we are previewing the book, we are setting understandings of this is what we're previewing, this is what we're looking at, this is what's happening in the text, and we're focusing on those comprehension strategies so that they can have a frame of reference, because they're coming with less understanding of the sea cucumber. And my mind was blown, like I just could not believe it. So we have to understand what knowledge level are they bringing to us, and not look at them all like, oh, you're all first graders, and so you all only know how to do this. Or I'm working with my small group and you're all first graders and you're all struggling on these sounds. They still have a different understanding of language and the words they understand, and they all have a different frame of reference. So you can't just look at them and think, well, you're all struggling, so you probably all don't know what a cucumber is, right? So we have to understand the cultural differences of our children too. Did that answer all of your questions? Okay.
Thank you, Member Byrd. I was actually next. So this was fabulous. Like, this was a really great presentation, and we appreciate you being here with us today. So I love everything that you're saying, and I'm not a teacher by trade. I substitute taught for a couple years, but I'm not a teacher by trade. But immediately my mind goes to, this is fabulous. Mm-hmm. Every teacher wants to be able to teach a student how to read. And when I attended some of the classes, what I was really hearing from our veteran teachers was, I didn't know. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't know. I knew how to teach. I didn't know how to teach literacy. I didn't know how to teach them to read, because it wasn't what they were taught or how they were taught to teach a child to read.
Yep.
And so they're learning for the first time how to teach to read. So in my mind, in a perfect world, everything that you described, every teacher would be able to do every day. Mm-hmm. But it's not a perfect world. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of information for teachers to learn, and we've just started the training, and we've trained so many teachers, but it's not just about the training. Mm-hmm. It's about putting, you mentioned fidelity several times. It's implementing with fidelity. It's putting the teachers in there that know how to teach, modeling for the teachers, coaching the teachers, and then when we're evaluating them on how they're teaching literacy to the science of reading, do our evaluators even know what they're looking at to understand fully that a teacher is doing it correctly or incorrectly? And most of our evaluations are done by APs and Ps and our principals. And I know that they're being trained too, but they're getting, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sure Mr. Russo will step in and tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like, I don't know that the principals are getting coached, or those infusions of resources. So in my mind, like, there's all this continuum that must happen. And it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge job to make sure that it's done with fidelity, because as we know, if it's not done with fidelity, we're not going to get the data results that we should see if it's done with fidelity. And then I'm worried we're going to be like, oh, well, it didn't work. It didn't work. But we know, like, for the first time ever, this is evidence-based, and the science shows us, yes, this will work if done with fidelity. So, like, what would be your suggestions? Like, I mean, how we have 25,000 employees. We have over 200 schools. Of course, we're just looking at like K through 2, so that's a little bit more manageable. But what would it look like in your mind? Like, what are the steps that we should be doing, and the resources? Because unfortunately, we don't have unlimited resources when it comes to coaches and the modeling and stuff.
Nobody
how
does.
do we do this with efficacy? Like, how do we implement this? Because as a board member, I'm overwhelmed. I've got to imagine, we all know this is an overwhelming task. So what would how would we do that? Because teachers are overwhelmed and they're overworked. And when they sit and they do, like, I'm thinking, okay, this is what they would do when they're doing their interventions, when they're doing like their one-on-one, or they're doing their centers, right? But I'm also hearing from teachers that some of their centers are scripted. And so I just want to make sure that we're giving our teachers everything that they need to kind of push this through with fidelity, because we have prisons that are being built based on how many third graders fail the FCAT. It's not the FCAT, the FAST test. And in that FAST test, a lot of things that you just described exist. They're asking a child about a camel, and a child may be able to read, they may be able to decode, but they don't know what the heck a camel is. They've never experienced that, so their comprehension is going to be low because they don't understand the context of the passage.
Right. I think, let me see if I can move this back here. Sorry. Well, I will not. I think the programs that you guys have set, I've been to SIPS trainings, even though I've never taught SIPS. I did work, James Patterson gave University of Florida a lot of money a few years ago, and I was the professional development coordinator for the James Patterson Literacy Challenge, which was super fun. He really values education and teaching kids how to read. So our job was to go to counties across the state and teach teachers about the science of reading in like this deep summer program for a week. And then we had what we considered like expert teachers, but they were a part of our staff and they were assigned to a school and they would go in and support the teachers. That's a hefty task, right? It was great and we did a great job and we loved every second of it. But it was always kind of wondering about how do we know every teacher knows every single thing? We can't. So having programs like SIPS and Heggerty has probably been beneficial for your teachers. Although it's scripted, I would guess that you all know how to read really well. Decode. You can all decode and comprehend. But I would guess if I sat down and assessed you individually on each sound that every letter in the alphabet makes, even simple ones that you think you know, I bet you wouldn't. I bet you would make some of them incorrectly, right? So it's about what is manageable for people that know how to read, right? And so our teachers know how to read, and a lot of them know how to make those letter sounds, but not all of them do. So making sure some of our K through 3 or K through 2 teachers really understand letter sounds, really understand about that sound that letter makes consistently, and those kids understand it, understand the schwa sound, but coming up with some sort of like systematic like checklist to make sure, okay, can the teacher teach, K camel. Did they teach that by the time the kid gets to a test? I don't think that we can do that, and that's the hard part. So what can we do that is manageable and meaningful, that gets the most bang for our buck as we continue to build? And we think about it as a triangle. What is a foundational building that we can build for these teachers, and then not give up on it and keep moving forward till we have the teachers understand what is important vocabulary instruction. What does it look like? Can they pick out words in books? Can they make student explanations for words and not just give the run-of-the-mill definition of a word? So teaching that, explaining fluency and how deep do they understand fluency, understanding language. Do they understand that kids are coming with less understanding than other kids? They understand it, they feel it, they see it every day. But reminding them of some of those things that they maybe learned in their program or maybe didn't. Reminding them of those things are really important. I'm not sure everything that the team over here is doing, but I do know that they are trying to create professional development opportunities that build on this science of reading. In fact, I think the first meeting I came to, you were presenting, and I was like, wow, he knows a lot about the science of reading up there. I was very, very impressed. And then we met afterwards. So I think they're trying to make things meaningful and manageable for these teachers, but understanding some of these programs are going to have to be a little bit scripted.
Yes.
SIPs. What they're using there, Haggerty. But I also think we need to ask teachers their opinions of how is this going? We can't just say, here it is, and then walk off. I've been told, I don't know, I've never taught Haggerty. I have been told that there is a lot of a deep phonological awareness section to it that may be overwhelming for teachers to try to get through. And so we need to remind them, like, hey, listen, you can teach vocabulary when they're lining up sometimes. You can review vocabulary. So, hey, who can tell me what this word means? Or if I give you the word, who can find the word and tell me what it is? And then you can line up. So some of these things can be happening ongoing throughout the day. It doesn't have to be just during their however minute reading block they have. So reminding them of these good practices that they know, but maybe they just haven't used in a while, or they forgot, or they're getting bogged down in the little things when we can see a bigger picture.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And our team has done a phenomenal job. I sat in on one of their trainings, and it's phenomenal. Like what we're teaching the teachers and about the science of reading and what they do. We're doing a great job.
Yes.
My concern is still with just the fidelity and the push in resources and ensuring that those that are trained, we continue to model and to coach them, and that those that are coming into the room to do that really have a very strong understanding of the science of reading and what that means, so that they don't confuse teachers, further confuse teachers. Because it's a lot of information. I learned so much in a couple of hours, and yet I've probably forgotten half of it. Like, I know just enough to get me in trouble. And teachers are like, it takes multiple times to kind of retain that information, and then to be able to emulate it, authentically, constantly, right? Like, you're not even thinking about what you need to do. It's just an automatic. It's a muscle reflex. It takes a lot more training and a lot more coaching and a lot more modeling. So,
and in training and coaching too, I think we have to remember with our teachers, we need to go in and tell them, I know you're doing a lot of great stuff, and I see you doing it.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say, I don't know some of these things,
Right.
because I want to build on that. And I think that's what I have found the team has been really trying to do. I feel like they've been trying to give a safe space for the teachers to say, I know that, but also like, maybe I did forget that, and that's okay. And making them, because I think when we make them feel safe in this, because, they're reading wars and, are you teaching reading right? Are you not teaching reading right? If we're making them feel safe and they can build on what they know, I think that's where we start.
yeah, no, I agree. And I will say, I haven't spoken to a teacher that didn't want their students to be successful, or they didn't want their students to read. Sometimes they just don't know how to do that. And I think this is the key. I've been in education. I've worked on education policy for 15 years. And I've seen a lot of things come and go in different pedagogy that I didn't even understand because I'm not a teacher. But for the first time, I felt like this is kind of like the secret sauce. Like, this could change our trajectory. And see, I make up my own words, so clearly I
It's
don't know.
okay, but we have to remember, this isn't new, though. This
Right.
is all stuff we've always known. It's always been there. It's the National Reading Panel, 2000, 2001, we've always known it. Sometimes we've been sidetracked, or we've focused too heavily on things that were not, maybe should not have
Unbalanced
been.
literacy, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's always been there. Even if you go back and you can find the Put Reading First, anyone who's taught that Put Reading First little book, I still have that in my shelf. Even that still would help teachers along. And that's 2001.
Yeah.
So it's been there. We just have to make sure that they know that it's been there. And some of them need to be reminded of the confidence of, you knew that.
Right.
You know it.
Right.
Just stay the course.
Yeah. My daughter was a struggling reader in second grade, and knowing what I know now, which I did not know then, I told her recently, she's 27. I'm like, it wasn't your fault. But what that did to her, like being and knowing that she was a struggling reader when her peers weren't, it really did a lot to her self-esteem. And then it just, so anything, because I just look at it from the lens of my child,
Yep.
because how can you not? And I think, I don't want any child to feel like my child felt. Like, she felt stupid. She would say, Mom, why am I stupid? And I'd be like, baby, you're not stupid. But I told her, I'm like, it wasn't your fault. Now I know maybe you just weren't taught the correct way, or the way that you needed to learn. So I'm so thankful for you, so thankful that the district is doing this, and I'm confident that this is just going to help so many kids, so many students.
Well, I hope so, but we can't stop here,
No.
right? We need to keep pushing forward and
Yes.
making every kid feel seen and heard, and
Yes.
realizing.
And that's the training and the modeling, and that's where all that has to come in. And
Yeah.
we got a lot of work ahead of us, but we have a great team that's leading the charge. So I have faith that we'll get it done. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dr. Kester-Dintel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for that presentation. It makes me want to go back into the classroom. It does. It makes me. So I was an elementary teacher, and I do have my degrees in education and my master's in literacy. So and I agree that this isn't new information, but the way you presented it is new to me. And it just, you did a great job of explaining how complex the whole process is, and it's invisible. So we don't see it going on in someone's head as they're reading. So it makes it even more difficult. And then when you add or multiply 20 or 30 kids in a class, it is a very challenging endeavor. But it is one of the best positions to be in, to be a reading teacher. It is so rewarding, and I loved it when I did that.
Yeah.
And even with my background, my two children also had very different experiences. One was engaging in high-level comprehension, but didn't enjoy decoding words until like second grade. And her brother was the opposite.
And they didn't need the same things.
No.
No.
And they came from the same family, same
Yep.
trips we went on and all of that. But so I understand that the individual needs are always very different. And one of the things that I struggled with as a teacher was using the reading text, because it often had stories or lessons that did not relate to the students. And then I was forced to somehow make it relevant and then teach the skills and make it interesting as well. So I preferred, when I was teaching, to not use the textbook. And we didn't, and my principal at the time didn't require us to use the textbook. We had classroom libraries that were so rich, and we used our own mentor texts, and we used our own read alouds and small groups, and we had that freedom to kind of tailor it to what the students' needs were. And we were able to get to know the students well and what their interests were and their struggles. And that was a joy at that time. And it's been a while since I was in the classroom, but I do remember the CRMs were constraining to me as a teacher. Not just for me, but in that I couldn't just teach creatively, but I didn't feel like I was able to really hit all those needs. So I would be interested in seeing what other resources that we allow our teachers to use outside the reading texts or the CRMs. I know that CRMs are a big resource for most of our teachers. I don't know how many feel like they have freedom to use something else to make sure that we're connecting with those students.
Yeah. I know when I was teaching, it was different because I taught in different schools, and it was different from principal to principal, and the expectation from principal to principal was never seemed to be the same. So I always felt like that was hard, principals being on the same page in the elementary grades of, what we can and can't do is really important. But I feel the same way. I taught, I had to use the textbook. It was, I was really overwhelmed my first year. And my first grade teacher was working at the district. She was the reading coordinator. And I just went to her and I was like, hey, remember me from first grade? And she did. And I love her still to this day. Was a mentor to me my first year. And I was so overwhelmed that she told me, Sarah, pick the starred things and teach the starred things to your kids the first year. So like in this book, only the starred. So there were some things that I didn't get to, but I knew that I got to the most important things, right?
Right.
And so having good, strong mentors to these teachers that are maybe not even in the school would be incredibly important to help them figure out, okay, what do I need to get to? What's the most important thing? But I think focusing our attention on the standards of what needs to be taught is important, but then, parsing it down into our individual needs of our students. But not every teacher is going to be excited about the same thing that we are excited about, like picking my own book and pre-teaching it and looking at the vocabulary words and teaching all these vocabulary words. Not every teacher is going to feel confident or comfortable in doing that, so we need to be mindful of that too.
That's right. Well, I appreciate this, and I think just this presentation alone gives so much background for people who are not familiar with all that goes into learning to read and teaching kids to read. I hope that we have it posted, not just on the OCPS website, but maybe on the individual school websites, because a lot of parents never come to the main OCPS website, but they do go to their kids' school website. So it might be helpful to have that, what you've presented. I think it would give parents some language to use when they're talking to teachers. It can help that communication and help them understand what they can be doing as well. So I think that's important, and I hope we can make sure that that is really available. And another resource I wanted to add that is so important that I didn't see listed is classroom libraries and our media centers, and the importance of having such a diverse selection of reading
choice.
Material. For those same reasons that you said, that they really are interested in baseball, or they know all about it. We want to have those resources there so that they can practice those skills and go to those higher level texts or lower level texts, whichever one that they want to read. That self-selection is so key.
Choice in what they want to learn about, or again, like we said, the connections of text. So there may be a text to self connection that you just don't quite understand because you didn't have that experience growing up, but they certainly have. And this text is making them feel better about an experience that you're not familiar with. Or maybe it's a great experience and they went somewhere with their parents and they saw it, and it's a reminder of something super great in their life. So we just need to remember that there's different ways kids connect with text, and it's not the same way for everyone.
Right, and even read aloud, like when I would read Wonder to my students. They didn't all relate to it personally, but they learned a lot from it. And those are just phenomenal opportunities to teach. Anyway, thank you so much. I enjoyed this. And I hope that I hope the district is able to kind of continue using you as a resource. Not that our team doesn't already know this, but just kind of reinforce for them to help them know as well that they're doing the right things. You know,
They're pretty
and
great.
Yeah.
I've gotten to know them, and they're pretty great. So
that's great.
They're pretty easy to work with.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Castro-Dental. Member Felder.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say, I'm a teacher. I taught theater and English literature. What an incredible journey teachers will be able to take their children on, listening to how you presented this, how you did this presentation today. Because teaching should be, in most of the time it is, but children learning from teachers, it should be a journey, an exploration, something you're doing different and new every day. Reading has always been an issue. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in 1956, when segregation was at an all-time high all over the country. So teachers had to be creative in terms of teaching students, because the books we used were old and outdated. So there was a need for teachers to go out and beyond. And now in 2024, what was done is now sort of not amplified, but like opened up. We can see, it's been done, but now we have an understanding of how it was done and why it was done. One of my concerns, and you touched on every area in terms of how you approach reading to children, but we're living in an age and a time that what's language is very, very different. For an example, you have a first grade student or a pre-K student come in, and one of the first things I think you try to teach them is how to pronounce their names. But if their names are pronounced differently, give me an example. When you spell Gazmin, according to English language, that's Gasman. But the child says, my name is Jasmine. So, and you're trying to teach phonemic awareness and phonics. So I guess the question is, in this deliberation, because it was so beautifully done, was that a consideration with culture? Not just with African American kids, but some of our Asian students, the way their names look and the way their names are spelled.
Sure.
I won't say it over the mic because I know we are being televised, but I really mispronounced a student's name. One of my Asian students' name, it was Tuphuc. You can imagine how I pronounced it.
Sure.
And it was supposed to be Tufu. But according to what we understand about phonetics in the English language, I said something else.
Right.
And the child never answered. I was like, where's this child? And I asked people, where's this kid? So having a student with the name or the alphabet, the way they understand the alphabet, how would we teach, those children? Because where would you grab? Because a first-year teacher coming in, I don't know whether or not the books give them all that variety of cultural differences and languages and how names are pronounced, but if they don't have it, they wouldn't be able to use this beautifully designed piece that you just presented to us. So I guess I would like to ask you, how would you approach that? And the next thing I just want to say, I love the example you gave about the beach and the spine. I started off telling you I was a theater teacher. Whenever I teach a play, the first thing I say to my students, what is the spine? If you look at your physical body, if your spine is out of order, you can't bend, you can't walk, you can't sit, you can't do anything. So I love the idea of talking about the spine, helping children understand, even if they didn't understand the word spine, you could go to their back, touch their back. If I put my hand back here, what can you do? So I guess I would like to ask you, how would you approach this process when you have children in schools that are clearly culturally diverse? Lisa Delpit wrote a book called Teaching Other People's Children.
Yes.
I love that book. So I just want to hear I want you to share some of the things with me.
I mean, I don't know that this is grounded in science or anything for me, but for me, I think being culturally responsive is incredibly important, and that was infused in my program, and understanding not every child looks like me, not every child's coming from the same background as me, and not every child is going to leave my classroom knowing the same things as somebody else. When I've had students with different spelling structures to their name, and the sound to spelling correspondence didn't match, I just told them, that's just a difference in how your parents did it. That's just they decided to spell your name that way because maybe somewhere in your history, an aunt or an uncle, or maybe that is somewhere from where your ancestors are from, that's how they spelled it. And I would address that with the child and let them know, it's perfectly way for you to spell your name. But here, the sound says this across the board, and that's the rule in the English language of how we spell it. But understanding that the spelling of their name is not bad or wrong or incorrect. It's just different than what they're going to see here on out. So I'm going to need them to understand, in your name it sounds like this, but in most words it's going to sound, or in all words, it's going to sound like this.
And see, I know that some students, if you're dealing with that as a kid, as a student, and you're looking at other words, a child will run into some difficulties. And I guess I'm saying this because I'm hoping and I believe that teachers would try to consider that, because that's so important, because like the cucumber story, that's so important to help them understand even at a young age. And as Board Member Casadena mentioned, not just on our website, but maybe on the school, so that in some ways we're kind of educating our parents. They go on the school website so they can see some things, because reading is really fundamental. We say it all the time, but it truly is. And so I hope that this will be presented and available to our schools. And you may need to come back again or do professional development for schools or parents, because it's so important that parents, along with their children, understand that reading is wonderful. It's the gateway to liberty and freedom of a good life. Because if you can't read, you can't function. And so it's important that they understand, and it's not to be looked at as something difficult or hard, because I never finished watching the Titanic ever. I've tried 4 times. Can never get through the Titanic.
That I Survived book's pretty great.
I cannot. So I'm so happy, and I love this, and I'm sure you're going to make it available to board members so we can have it. But I really appreciate your presentation. I was so excited. It's like a journey, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Felder. Member Gould, you're up.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Voice from the heavens.
Thank you for this presentation. It was fantastic. And my question is, you talked about the relevancy and you used the baseball example, but how are teachers able to draw out those interests and match them to the kids easily?
Can you repeat that? How are the teachers able to?
So you talked about the relevancy in the baseball example, right? Like they get more engaged and they're more willing to learn to read, and it's relevant to them, and their comprehensive goes up. Is there a methodology or a tool that helps the teachers understand where each child's interest lies so that they can get that maximum engagement from those children?
I think being familiar with the fact that you have to engage them and talk to them and learn about them as little people, I think that's probably the fundamental, because there's not something that I know of that is, how we have to do this. For instance, in the early childhoods, they may have a morning meeting where the kids come to the rug at the beginning of the day, and they kind of talk about, what happened in their life, what happened in the world. I think we encourage kids to write in journals. Maybe they're not writing, maybe they're drawing pictures, and the teacher's looking at the journal and trying to make connections with the child somehow. And I think some of that's kind of the fundamental how to be a teacher things that teachers learn is just really how to connect with students, but I can't think of something specific in reading. I think what I did as a classroom teacher was I started my reading block with pre-teaching the vocabulary of the week. And I made that vocabulary, I made them all come, and they were in third grade, and made them sit on the carpet, on the floor. And some of them wanted to sit on their desk, and that was fine as long as we were in a circle. And I looked at the vocabulary words for the week, and I pre-taught them. And we spent 45 minutes going over the vocabulary, and not with your run-of-the-mill, this is the dictionary vocabulary. It was bringing those vocabulary words to life, understanding the morphology of some of them. Maybe they had Greek or Latin roots, and we would maybe discuss that. Or we would kind of discuss more about, this is the vocabulary word, this is what it means, and now let's together create a student-friendly explanation of it. So if, let's say the word was shattered, which means to break into many pieces, I might say, Sarah carried the dish, and the dish fell and shattered into many pieces. So I made a connection to a person in the class, or myself or that child, so that they had a personal connection to the word. Then I gave them an explanation of the word and made them have a visual understanding of what the word was. So that helps them make connections to the vocabulary words. And then teachers try to make connections through vocabulary words with things that the students are familiar with or what they know.
Member Gould, anything else?
Okay, thank you. I get that part. It's more of engaging kids that are struggling with reading, but may engage more because of an interest they have, and now they're reading about that interest. But I get what you're saying.
I don't think, I think that there's more to a child who's struggling to read than just intrinsically motivating them to read, though, because there could be a number of reasons why they're not reading. So I think progress monitoring, maybe this will hit on what you're asking, progress monitoring and exactly knowing why or specifically that child is struggling to read would be the best place to start. So maybe you can connect with them because you know that they just don't like working on fluency. It stresses them out. They don't like it. Maybe you can talk to them about, we're building our fluency for this reason and giving them a reason to do some of these activities. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, you've answered on what tools are available. I'm a believer in trying to figure out who the kids are and matching education and experience, just like you were talking about, to them. Sometimes it's a new experience, it's exciting, but sometimes it's really engaging in their interests, and then using all those technical tools as well to explain it to them. But thank you, you did answer it.
Okay.
That's it.
Sorry.
Thank you, Member Gould. Member Front.
Oh, thank you. I just had one other question.
Sure.
When we're looking at a lot of our teachers right now, one of our biggest, hurdles maybe, would be making sure that every teacher is trained in the science of reading and understands it thoroughly and has the tools needed to implement it in the classroom.
Sure.
What is the University of Florida doing right now to train teachers as they're going through their studies so that when they come to us, they're not needing this major overhaul in a sense?
So we have a program where the students are going for elementary education. It's always been infused in our classrooms in the science of reading. So all of my classroom teaching was infused in that when I was going through the program. So they were always teaching letters, letter sounds, the importance of decoding, early intervention and early decoding. That's still being taught at the University of Florida. That is at the fundamental heart of what we do at UF. At the University of Florida Institute, Literacy Institute, there are programs that have been created that we use. We have, and I wasn't going to talk about specific materials that related to my work because I don't want that to take away from the bigger conversation of what I'm trying to have with you guys today. But we do have UFly, which is a program that's specific to K through 2 that is a not intervention, but it is, I should not say that. It is a phonics program, phonics only. You would have to supplement with other instructional pieces. It is specific to phonics in K through 2. We also have the University of Florida Dyslexia Certificate Program. I specifically teach in that. I work with UFly, but I don't work on the UFly Foundation curriculum, but I'm very familiar with it, and I think it's a great curriculum. But you don't want to be adding curriculum to something that you already have that's working for you. So you wouldn't want to just add it because you have something that your teachers are seeing success with. You would want to use this if you had nothing for phonics. The dyslexia certificate program we have, there's 5 courses. We have teachers from all over the world. I have a student right now from Dubai. I had someone from Korea. I've had a student from Kenya. I have people from all over the world wanting to learn about the science of reading right now. That's specific to dyslexia interventions and what happens when you have dyslexia and what it looks like, and specific intervention, an intervention model that you can use, either small group or one-on-one. For teachers who have, maybe they tutor, maybe they do this one-on-one, maybe they want to use it in their classroom. And it's specific to teaching teachers about, our first class is about letter sounds, and I assess teachers and they're making letter sounds, and I listen to their letter sounds and I help them make them. And then our next class is more about the science of reading in the brain. And then the third course is assessment. So what assessments do you need to assess students? Educators cannot label a student with dyslexia. That has to be a medical diagnosis. But these are assessments that you can pinpoint where the child is struggling in decoding, in qualitative word inventories. You might use the core phonics survey, you might use the QRI. There's a number of things that you can use to pinpoint, okay, where is this child struggling and how can I help them? Course 4 is an intervention class where they learn about the UFly intervention. That is different than UFly Foundations. And then course 5 is an internship. So we have a lot of teachers that do that. We have all kinds of, we have homeschool parents that do it. We have principals. We've had the State Department has taken the courses so that they're familiar with them. But that's something you'd have to pay for as like a student. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. It's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have one final question. Like, what would your recommendation be for our older students, like our middle school students that really never got that basic phonemic awareness or the comprehension, like they just didn't grab it together? Because when I talk to like principals, it's difficult because kids don't want to be called out. Like they don't want to be doing sound words, even in a remediation class, because it's embarrassing. So what would be your recommendation that would help us with those students kind of get back on track with their learning and their literacy?
So when they shift to reading to learn, I think there needs to be an emphasis on morphological awareness, Greek, Latin roots. Where do these words come from? What do they mean? Multisyllabic word decoding, working on multisyllabic words. That's very important. Again, it's always going to go back, I think, is building their language and making connections to the text that they're reading. And giving them strategies that will help them, but morphological awareness is incredibly important as you move into 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade and beyond.
Thank you so much. That's great information. Well, that is all the questions that we have, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Vasquez, but thank you again.
You're welcome.
This was wonderful.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You heard that, more working together, so I'm excited and truly thankful for all the information today and the collaboration with our team. All right, next we are going to move into everyone's favorite, rezoning. We actually have 2 sites that we are looking at, so I'm going to wait for the team to move into position. Stacy Neal will start the presentation and introduce her team. We will be looking at the rezoning of sites 97 and site 126.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. So good morning, Superintendent Vasquez is co-chair, so Gallo, well, you guys are switching up on me. Okay, so everybody, school board members, OCPS staff. Before we start, I would like to introduce additional student enrollment staff that are here today. Senior administrators Amy McCormick, Dr. Andy Westerman, Thomas Moore, Moore, and Renata Paropshe behind me. Student enrollment is bringing forth, sorry, let's go. You got it? Okay, student enrollment is bringing forth a fall rezoning for 2024, 97-E-2, and 126E-4. The first process is all rezonings follow school board policy JC. Staff with direction from the superintendent commences rezoning. A timeline is developed. Staff meets with principals, executive leaders, and school board members. Research and data is collected. Staff holds community meeting, and we're here tonight or today for the work session to present options. There will be a rule development, and then finally the public hearing, and the rezoning notebook on which it is, where all the research is kept. Rezoning types. So just to reacclimate or refresh, we have technical, and those are rezonings that are in uninhabited area or property, and no students are involved. Targeted rezonings affect a small area, and there are a limited number of students involved. And relief schools, this is when we're opening a new school, and it always involves a large area and affects a large number of students, and that is what we're having today, 2 relief schools. The rezoning timeline. On September 23rd, we held the community meeting. October 8th, we're here for the work session. October 22nd will be the rule development workshop, and November 12th is the school board public hearing. The timeline, so if approved, 97-E-2 is to commence school year 25-26. 126-E-4, if approved, will be for school year 26-27. The naming convention. Orange County Public Schools has a unique naming convention for relief schools. Here you see 97. 97 is the real estate property number, E is the school type, and this is an elementary, and the number at the end represents the school board member's district, and where the school is located. And 2 is Salamanca, board member Salamanca's area. Rezoning on the website. All rezoning can be found on the Orange County Public Schools website at www.ocps.net. And from the website header, click on schools, then school rezoning. All current rezoning is separated by school level. The timeline is provided. The input survey links are located along with the current map options. And once the school board members vote, information is then relocated to the board-approved rezonings. No, go. Okay, and so grandfather transfers. Orange County Public Schools offers grandfather transfers to students involved in the rezoning. The grandfather transfer can be found on the Orange County website by hovering over the current header, families, or current families, click on school choice, and from there, click on student enrollment transfers. Click apply, and then apply for the grandfather transfer. The grandfather transfer is for current students who have been rezoned by OCPS 2 or more times during a school level and have resided at the current address. Students rezoned from an established school to another established school have the option to remain at the existing school instead of attending the rezoned school. This transfer is also available to students who will be in the 5th or 8th grade and rezoned to a new relief elementary or middle school. It is also important to mention transportation is not provided by OCPS and siblings of the student granted the transfer. The sibling of the student who is granted may be eligible to apply for the transfer as long as the school has an available seat for the sibling and the school is not over capacity. The sibling transfer, if granted, is for 1 school year. The deadline to apply for the transfers, April 30th, 2025 for 97E-2 and April 30th, 2026 for 126-E-4. We allow for community input, and at the end of the community meeting, survey links became available for parents to provide input on options presented. Each area has a corresponding link, and parents have until 7 a.m. Tuesday, October 8th to provide input. When submitting input, it is important to include your name, address. Input is limited and is also limited to 1 per household. In addition to the survey links, families may submit petitions and email schoolrezoning@ocps.net. Once again, keep in mind, 1 input per family. This concludes my introduction, and now Tommy will walk us through growth in the area for our first rezoning.
Okay, next. Or do you want me to do the clicking? Okay, you got me. All right. All right. I want to orient you with this map. We're in the southeast part of the county. The red outlines represent the elementary school attendance zone boundaries. The attendance zone for Sunblaze Elementary is centered on this map. The hexagons represent areas where we currently have students. The colored areas are projects where we will have future students. These areas are part of our residential database. The colors represent each project's status, whether it's planned, platting, or underway. Now, if you recall, planned are the long-ranged projects. Platting means it's going to start within a year, and underway means it's actually going vertical. All right. The school we're opening, 97E2, is in the development of Story Park, which is mostly completed. The area to the northeast of the school site is Meridian Park, and when completed, this will have 6,400 homes. Meridian Park is currently about 10% completed. To the east of Meridian Park is Sunbridge, which is projected to have another 7,000 homes. And to the south is Camino Real, which is projected to have another 3,000 homes. So in the district's 10-year capital plan, an additional elementary school, 58E2, is projected to open in 2031-32, and we also have an elementary school, 99E2, reserved in the Meridian Parks area. And the last point I want to make is about this slide is there's a distinct separation in transportation access from Moss Park Elementary School zone northward. And if you click, there are plans for this to change with an expansion of the Innovation Way South and the southern portion of Meridian Parks. We don't have a timeline for these transportation projects. They will not happen within the next couple of years. But when they do, we'll have more opportunities to relieve Moss Park. We'll just have more opportunities to relieve Moss Park. So to go over our next attendance zone options, I'm going to introduce Amy McCormick.
Thank you, Tommy. Good afternoon. I am Amy McCormick, and I'll present the first of our proposed rezonings. We have two options to present for 97-E-2. Let's take a look at option 1. The red lines represent current elementary school zones, and the colored areas are the new proposed zones. The south side of the map is the Osceola County line, and to the right is County Road 13. Rezoning for 97-E-2 involves Moss Park Elementary, Sunblaze Elementary, and Vista Lakes Elementary. It should be noted that there are currently no OCPS elementary students residing in the proposed rezoning area for Vista Lakes Elementary. The yellow area is the proposed new school zone. Purple area is the new Moss Park Elementary. New Sunblaze Elementary is in salmon color, and proposed Vista Lakes Elementary in green. For each school, a comment bubble contains information such as the school's permanent program capacity, or PPC. The proposed resides for the option presented, and the projected resides for the 2025 school year. Starting with the new school, the PPC is 791. Proposed resides is 784, and projected for the 2025 school year, 720 to 740. Moss Park Elementary has a PPC of 796, with proposed resides 909, and a projected for the 2025 school year, 840 to 860. Sunblaze Elementary has a PPC of 755, with proposed resides 787, and projected for the 2025 school year, 700 to 720. Vista Lakes Elementary has a PPC of 731, with a proposed resides 581, and for the 2025 school year, 520 to 540. The next map shows a zoomed-in area of the current elementary school lines in red. Again, the area in yellow is the proposed new school zone for 97-E-2. Moss Park Elementary is in purple, and Sunblaze Elementary in salmon. The data table here shows the impact of creating this zone. The first column shows each of the school's permanent program capacity, or PPC. The new school is 791, Moss Park 796, Sunblaze 755, and Vista Lakes 731. The next column shows the enrollment as of February 15th, 2024, with the percentage of white, black, and other, as well as the percentage of non-Hispanic and Hispanic. Moss Park Elementary had an enrollment of 951, 78% white, 9% black, and 13% other. Also, 55% non-Hispanic and 45% Hispanic. You can review the numbers for the other schools in the next two rows. The third column shows the current number of students residing. That's 1,001 for Moss Park, 1,479 for Sunblaze, and 581 for Vista Lakes Elementary Schools. The fourth column shows the proposed and projected numbers for when the schools open during the 2025 school year. For example, for 97-E-2, the proposed resides is 784, with 72% white, 10% black, 18% other, 48% non-Hispanic, and 52% Hispanic. And looking at 720 to 740 projected students in the 2025 school year. Please take a moment to review the numbers for the other schools in the next three rows. The final three columns represent other demographic information currently and for the proposed opening in 2025-2026. FARMS stands for Free and Reduced Meals, ESE is for Exceptional Student Education, and ELL stands for English Language Learners. You can see for Moss Park Elementary, the FARMS currently is 25% and proposed is 24%. ESE is currently at 9% and would remain the same at 9%. Finally, ELL is currently 12% and would change to 13%. Please take a moment to review the numbers for the other schools in the next two rows. Option 2 includes Moss Park Elementary, Sunblaze Elementary, and Vista Lakes Elementary, with a slight difference between Moss Park Elementary and the new school. Again, the red lines are the current elementary school zones. Starting with the new school, the proposed resides is 692, and projected enrollment for the 2025 school year, 650 to 670. Moss Park Elementary has a proposed resides of 1,001, and for the 2025 school year, an enrollment of 920 to 940. Sunblaze Elementary has a proposed resides of 787 and projected enrollment for the 2025 school year, 700 to 720. No change from option 1. Vista Lakes Elementary has a proposed resides of 581 and projected enrollment for the 2025 school year of 520 to 540. Also no change from option 1. The next map shows a closer view of the area of the current elementary school lines in red. Again, the area in yellow is the proposed new school zone for 97-E-2, Moss Park Elementary in purple, and Sunblaze Elementary in salmon. Option 2 differs from option 1 in the area zone from Moss Park Elementary. The area along Weewahootie remains in Moss Park instead of going to the new school, 97-E-2. The table shows the impact of creating these zones for option 2. The first column shows each of the school's permanent program capacity, or PPC. The new school, 791, Moss Park, 796, Sunblaze, 755, and Vista Lakes, 731. The numbers changed for 97-E-2 and Moss Park Elementary, leaving the numbers the same for the other two as option 1. I'll give everyone a moment to review these numbers. This map shows the two options side by side to see the zones and areas impacted by the different options. This slide shows the enrollment projections for option 1 and 2 for the opening year in yellow. Finally, the options overview, including the number of students residing currently and the projected number of students in 2025 for each option. You can see that Sunblaze Elementary and Vista Lakes Elementary are the same in both options. I'll give everyone a moment to review these numbers. This concludes my presentation on 97-E-2. Dr. Vasquez?
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if Board Member Salamanca is online or the chair, but we are now ready for any comments or questions the board might have related to the rezonings.
Thank you, Superintendent. Member Front.
The only thing I was just wanted to share or questions. We haven't gotten any feedback from the community yet.
We've received several. What happens is, because this is the work session, we usually don't present it to you. For the rule development, you'll have everything.
Okay. Just when I'm looking at the differences where you're incorporating, like in option 2, you can see you're incorporating more people into Moss Park. So it does make sense to me. Usually we have, if we have people that come with it like a targeted rezone and they want their little neighborhood put into their community school, it's over stuff like this. So when we're looking at option 2 and we incorporate this little, right now it just looks like a little portion of the community, but they have to drive out of their road past Moss Park. So in option 1, they would pass Moss Park, drive up then to the new school, or in option 2, they just drive down to Moss Park. Do you know if there's a new road coming that would connect them?
Yeah, so can you back up a couple more slides? Just to where, okay, that's a good one. That's a good one right there. And we have the ability to point? No?
Laser pointer on that.
Okay. Oh, you have a laser pointer. Can I borrow that? All right. I know you guys can't necessarily see what you can't see behind you, but right here. All right. So this is Innovation Way, and there's plans on Innovation Way crossing and going right by. This is where Innovation Middle School is. So it's supposed to cross, and there's a train track right here. That is the spur line that goes to the power plant, takes the coal to the power plant. It's supposed to cross right here, and then this neighborhood, when that happens, will then have access to go up here. But right now, as you said, they have to go down here and the road and go by Moss Park before they can get up here, even though they are in closer as a crow's flies to 97. So we don't have a timeline right now. There's things that have to be worked out because there's multiple jurisdictions involved in this between the city of Orlando and the county, and there's federal requirements about crossing a railroad track that complicate things. And I try to get a timeline. They don't have one yet, but I know it's not going to happen within the next couple of years before we open that school site. The idea in this scenario is to keep them at Moss Park in the meantime, and then when that access does open up, we can do it with a targeted, or we can do it when we open up, say, a future school site, when we open up 58 or 99 at a future year.
Okay. Oh, that's great information.
Yeah.
Okay. I think at least something to consider. Because the numbers on option 1 seem way better, but then numbers here aren't terrible. But okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Front. Dr. Vasquez.
I don't have a comment. Do we want to go to the next? I'm sorry, I didn't know if we were checking if anyone that's on the phone had a question. No.
Member Gould, do you have a question?
Okay.
No, I do not.
Okay. All right. So we will turn it back over, and we'll do the last rezoning presentation.
Okay, so take it away, Tommy.
Okay. All right. Do you want to drive? All right. All right, here we are in the far southwest portion of the county. Again, the hexagons represent areas where we currently have students. The colored areas are the projects where we'll have future students. Atwater Bay is the school we just opened this fall, which relieved Water Spring Elementary. We are setting the attendance zone for 126 EW4 to relieve Water Spring Elementary School once again for 2026. Around 126 EW4 is the southern Hartzog Road area just due west of Animal Kingdom and Epcot. This area is growing rapidly. For example, if you look east of 126 E4, you can see the numbers of elementary school students. Those students weren't there this past fall. We anticipate that there'll be many students in the red area surrounding the new school by the time it opens in 2026. 124 E4 is a second relief school and is programmed to open for the 2031-32 school year, which will relieve both 126 and Water Spring Elementary School one last time. Okay, and the last thing, click again. Last thing I want to show is that our current Water Spring and Panther Lake Elementary School zones divide the proposed Hartzog Road Attainable Housing Community property. This development is also better known as the Walt Disney Attainable Housing Project. We plan to change the zones to align this project with one school zone during this rezoning process. Okay, I'd like to introduce Dr. Andy Westerman, who will be giving the attendance zone options we've prepared.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll present those options. Again, this is a relief school for Water Spring Elementary and Panther Lake Elementary. This is option 1. The red lines are the current elementary zones lines, and the new proposed lines are in color. Water Spring is in purple, Panther Lake in green, and the new school is in yellow. Each proposed zone is accompanied by a text box with the following information: the name of the school, the PPC, proposed number of students in the new zone, and the projected number of students to attend the school in August of 2026 when the new school opens. For example, Panther Lake PPC is 791. The proposed number of students residing in the new zone is 771, and projected number of students to attend Panther Lake in August 2026 is between 670 and 690. Please notice the area on this map from Panther Lake Elementary School to Water Spring Elementary School. This includes the Disney Attainable housing project that is currently split between 2 zones and will be brought together into the same zone. Also, the southern portion of Panther Lake Elementary School and Water Spring Elementary School will be zoned to 126-E-4. Next is a closer view of the area. And the next slide is the data table for the demographic breakdown for each zone of option 1. I'll give everyone a moment to review the numbers. Option 2 includes the same schools. The red lines are the current elementary school zones, and the new proposed zones are in color. Water Spring is in purple, Panther Lake in green, and the new school is in yellow. The difference between option 1 and option 2 is the southern borderline between Water Spring Elementary School and the new school zone for 126-E-4. Next is a closer view of the area. And here's the data table for the demographic breakdown for option 2. I'll give everyone a moment to review the numbers. All right, option 3 includes again the same schools. The red lines are the current elementary zones, and the new proposed zones are in color. Water Spring is in purple, Panther Lake in green, and the new school in yellow. The difference for option 3 is that the Disney Attainable housing project is all zoned to Panther Lake Elementary School. The southern borderline between Water Spring Elementary School and the new school zone for 126-E-4 remains the same as in option 2. Next is a closer view of the area. And here's the data table for the demographic breakdown for option 3. Again, I'll give everyone a moment to review these numbers. This next slide shows all 3 option maps together for you to compare. I'll give everyone a moment to review these. This slide shows the enrollment projections for options 1, 2, and 3 for the opening year in yellow, and then when 124-E-4 would open in the 2031-32 school year as a relief school in gray. And finally, the options overview, including students residing and students projected. I'll give everyone a moment to review these numbers. This concludes my portion of the presentation. Dr. Vasquez?
Thank you, team. Appreciate the time and effort that's gone into both of these rezonings. We are now ready for any comments or questions from our board members.
Thank you, Dr. Vasquez, and thank you all for this great information. I don't have anybody queued in to speak at this point. Member Gould, do you have anything you would like to add?
To Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to.
Go ahead, please.
So part of what we have to really watch out for in West Orange, especially with that 545, is the intersections that are easy to cross kids. Which of these options is what I would call kind of the safest route for children with major or future road improvement crosswalks?
And, okay, I'm trying to find a slide that goes kind of in, that gets a little bit closer. Okay. One of the concerns that comes up, how much of a safety concern, there might be a safety concern, but there's also just driving and getting to the school, getting out, taking a left on that road, I hear is problematic and dangerous. And one Disney property, well, by moving that area into Water Spring, are we creating a difficulty with getting to that school because they're going to have to cross Avalon Road? And one of the things, and Board Member Gould, you brought this to our attention as well, is that they're required to do some roadway improvements that will improve access to that. One of which is they're adding a double left-hand turn lane on westbound Hartzog Road as it approaches Avalon Road. That will allow people to turn south on Avalon and get into Water Spring. The other thing, section that will allow direct access into that development right on Avalon. So in light of that, I think safe access to Water Spring, if I can figure out how to operate this. Okay, I'm going to go to the zoomed in. In option 3, we actually move those students, which will be on that little tiny portion. Okay, so this is like a fraction of the Hartzog Road. We would be moving into Panther. Folks would then be going into Panther Lake. Now, as you know, to get to Panther Lake is on the other side. So you'll be going up to, what's the road? And then making a cross, and students would have to cross or drive across to get to the high school. So in light of that, I think we might actually, option 1 and 2 might be better options as far as proximity.
Prepare to, that's okay.
Opportunity to review it, to give each of you a call to see if you have any questions. Again, God willing, I have cell service because in the hurricane